Hey everyone, welcome to the Muse podcast. We're your hosts, Jessica Kubasi
and Flannery Underwood.
So what are we talking about today, Flannery? What's on the roster?
Today we're talking about the stigma around natural light photography and how some people say that using natural light solely isn't real photography.
Are we gonna start fighting right now? We should just start fighting.
I think
straight
I got
up.
my boxing gloves out. I'm ready to go.
We just gotta
bring it.
Put the war paint
honestly,
on.
I feel like we have the same opinion on this, so
this is gonna be very biased.
I feel like you should kick it off, Jess,
because I've been shut on more. Okay, great, good, because I get roasted more about this. So, I have gotten comments about that. I posted a video about natural light, and a lot of people said, oh, that's not real photography. Like, you should be using strobes and, you should be using modifiers and all of this stuff. And back then, I didn't have the studio space for it. I didn't have the money for it. I didn't even have models for it, to be honest with you. So it's like, who am I going to photograph with if I did have a setup? I didn't really have that much. So, my whole thing was making do with what I had at the time, and that was literally just my camera and my lens. So that was where I was coming from, and it's so easy to toss around the idea that what another photographer is doing isn't real photography. You could say that really about anything, like, oh, that's not like real cooking, or that's not real painting, or you're not a real artist because you don't do A, B, and C. I just say everyone is so different in the way that they do things and the way that their style is, that as long as they like their work and they're not hurting anybody, I don't really see it's not like a big deal to me. I don't care how many strobes you use. I don't care if you don't want to use any strobes at all. But don't tell me that what I'm doing isn't considered real photography. It's not like there's a school that's stamping and saying, yep, you're real, you're fake.
I have been shooting my whole life, but only professionally in the past, I would say, a couple years as my full-time job. And when I first was seriously working as a professional photographer, I was legitimately scared of working with strobes because I just wasn't comfortable with them. I just didn't have the knowledge, and I hadn't educated myself yet on how to properly use them. And the first times I tried them, especially with some budget strobes, it's so crazy. The budget strobes seem to be way more complicated than some of the nicer, more high end. There are some more basic strobes, more cheaper versions, older versions that you look at it, and I would put it on my camera, or I would see the strobe and I would get so overwhelmed because I just didn't understand it. And I feel like a lot of photographers, when there's a new skill or a new tool, there's a little bit of hesitation. And I've seen people who say, oh, I don't do that. But I feel like sometimes people say that just because they don't yet have the skill for it yet, or maybe it's just not their style too, which I think is totally valid. But from my personal experience, majority of my shooting at the beginning started out with all natural light, and I was scared of using strobes. And now I use strobes all the time. And to be honest, majority of my photography is a mixture of strobe and natural light.
That's the best kind of light, to be honest. That's
kind of like my personal,
It's a little bit of everything. It's like a nice mix.
Totally. And I think you made a valid point too of, art is art, and just because you use natural light, just because it's there for you to use,
because it's free. Just because it's free. If they put a cost on natural light, if they're like, you need to pay $50 every time you want to shoot out here, everyone will be like, oh, you're amazing. Oh my God. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right? So true.
Someone's just constantly outside, like, please step in line to photograph in the sunlight,
So true. And I think that speaks volumes about certain people who think that the most expensive gear, you've done videos on this, Jess, where you don't need the nicest camera, you don't need the most expensive equipment to get amazing photos. And it's the same with strobes. Like, you don't need to use a strobe to get an amazing image, or you don't need modifiers. I think in my work too, a lot of my work over the past couple years has been travel photography, which is all natural light. And I didn't even bring a bounce with me. To be honest, you don't even have time to pull it out of your bag. Like, you're walking through the streets of India and it's so crowded and you have to snap a picture right there. Like, you're not going to be like, yo, excuse me.
Everybody just hold on a
Excuse
second.
me.
You just like, can you hold everything? This for me?
I just got to set my strobe up
can
right
you just
here
hold that
in this,
right there?
like, alley. No, it doesn't work like that.
You pull someone off the street, just like, bounce this, yep, a little higher.
Yeah.
Everybody's working for you now, like the whole neighborhood.
They got like all the kids out ready.
All the kids are like,
oh
yeah,
my
I got a job.
But it's true. It's like, when you're shooting with natural light, to be honest, sometimes I find it's even more challenging because you're limited. Because you can't move the sun. You can't be like, hey, can you just like move over to the left? Can you just like
centimeters
be a little softer today? Like, can the clouds just move in and diffuse more? Like, you get what you get and you have to adapt to that, which I think sometimes makes it even harder.
So basically, compared to a studio, I really think natural light can be more difficult at times. And let me tell you why. Because studio shoots are a controlled environment. So you don't have things like crazy weather. You don't have, random people coming up to you or getting kicked out. You don't have the police arresting you. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. And then the sun is changing every 2 minutes. And, it can get dark outside and you lose all of the light that you had to shoot with. And it's not as bright as it was anymore. Whereas in a studio, you got your lights set up and you're going to get that same nice photo every single time. You don't have to worry. You don't have to stress out about, okay, what's the next location? It's just there. Everything's kind of just set up for you. And you know what? Let me just say how it is. A lot of times people get their lights set up for them. And you think these photographers have time to set up their lights? No, they show up the day of the photo shoot. Everything is set up for them. They just stand there. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but they do press the button. I'm sorry, they're pressing the button. they didn't set it up, but they didn't set it up. And I'm sure there was thought and consideration into the setup and the style of the lighting. But what I'm trying to say is that it is harder to shoot creatively outside, work with the natural light, and work with all the different elements that are happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it all just comes down to how much time you've put into each. If you have only learned photography with strobes in a studio in a controlled environment, then you're going to think that's easier and you're going to be intimidated by shooting in natural light. Yeah. And you might go out at noon and try and shoot a model and be like, wow, these images are terrible.
The worst.
If you don't know how to shape it. At the end of the day, all you're doing as a photographer is you're shaping the light, whether you're inside or you're outside in a studio using strobes or using, even a white wall outside with sunlight to bounce in a certain way. You're shaping the light around the model to get the effect that you're looking for. And I think sometimes it's easy to get on a bandwagon of this is better or I'm in this camp, but you forget that we're all doing the same thing. We're all creating art. We're all trying to get the best images that express the creativity at its peak. And we're all just trying to shape the light. Like, come on, just do the right thing for me. Just please.
I feel like it's an argument people have just to because they ran out of stuff. They're like, yeah, because you use the sun. Like, I don't know, because I don't know. Right. It's like we all end up outside at some point to take pictures. So
yeah. And I think it comes from this place too of, again, with thinking that having more gear or more people around you, more equipment somehow translates into better images.
Yeah.
And it's totally not the case. My favorite images, best images I've ever taken have pretty much all been with natural light. And it's more about the subject, the landscape, how I felt in that moment too. And these are all very like personal things to me.
Yeah.
And I think people also just get caught up in judging other people's art. And I think it's fine. Like, everyone is entitled to their opinions and free speech, and that's what this podcast is. But there's no room for excessive hate on a specific style of anything, because it's art, it's creativity.
Like,
It's
why does that matter?
expression.
If someone's picture turns out good, whether it doesn't matter how many strobes they use. It's not like they take a bad picture but they're like, oh, I used 5 strobes, and then everyone's like, oh yes, it's so much better now. You know, it doesn't change the fact of the matter, which is the picture good at the end of the day. So if you use a lot of strobes and you get a good picture, great. If you don't, that's fine too. You don't, whatever you want to use, whatever you're comfortable using, and whatever your style is, go for it. I literally just don't care what people use, how many strobes, if they want to just shoot all natural light. If you can get the shot, then good for you, you know?
I think this also bleeds into the idea of people arguing that film or medium format is like superior. We've gone on about this.
Oh God.
We've gone on about this. And again, I think it's this like silly idea of people arguing that a specific format of like tools or creativity is better than another, which is just so weird. It's such a weird thing to say. And I think at the end of the day, people just assume again that things that require more technical skills or more time or more of a process to them somehow again makes better art. I mean, I feel like we kind of nailed it. Like, you can't judge people for shooting with strobes, shooting in natural light. Like, art is art, and you can't get on your high horse and say that one form of art is better than another.
Unless you're using like 10 strobes, then I'm going to judge you. I'm sorry. Like, I'm going to like screenshot it, send it in my group chat and be like, is this necessary?
That's overkill.
It's a little much.
That's overkill.
Like, do you need more than like, you see those people?
3?
There's some people who like literally, I mean, you can't even see a shadow anymore. Everything's just so well lit. Like, wow. Very impressive.
I think that's another interesting idea to think about, of people who shoot by the book and shoot like scientifically. This is the perfect image, right?
Yeah.
That you have the exact settings, that you have the perfect lens. And yet, and again, it's just personal opinion, but when you look at it, you don't have like an emotion, or the art just isn't there.
Yeah.
And again, it's all like how you connect with something. But I think there is kind of and people float in between these two, of being almost like a pixel peeper of something that is scientifically or on paper a perfect image. And then there's kind of on the other side where it's more free flowing, it's more loose, and the rules are kind of there to be broken. And again, there's no right or wrong, but I think as you're a beginner photographer, you start in the camp of trying to get perfect images, where you're trying to get, you know, I have so many people that ask me, what were your settings of this image, right? Where you say, how do you shoot? And I think that's so interesting because it's such a beginner question. And I asked because I asked that when I first started shooting. I was like, how did you get that image? How did you get such, and I didn't even know what shallow depth of field meant. And I was like, how did they get that image? But as you learn the rules, you're able to be more free flowing with the creativity part of it. And, you know, I think that also goes with like lighting, natural lights or strobe, where when you start to understand the basics and when you are able to shape the light in the way that you want to and manipulate it, then you kind of open up this whole world of creativity where you can kind of like explore more. And I feel like as I grow with my photography, I'm having more fun because I'm exploring all of those things more. So it's good. It's good to do both, you know, and it's good not to limit yourself.
Don't stick to just one thing. I'm sure there's people out there who legit have a ruler and they measure everything and make sure that it's the right, the everything's lined up in the picture and there's like leading lines and all that. But for me, I always started out, I literally just shot whatever was aesthetically appealing to me. So if the picture looked good, if the light looked good, that's what I shot. Obviously, you pick up a couple of technical tips here and there. Like leading lines can make for a very interesting picture. Do I follow this all the time? Absolutely not. I don't let those rules limit me in my photography. And I think when people are very, like, how people, they put that in their head, like, okay, no, the lines have to match up and the light has to be even all over her skin. Like, what? But why? Why are you can take a picture that's imperfect and it'll still come out really nice and very interesting. And, when I first started, I was like, oh, I need to have even light all of the time, like perfect, even lighting. I never even thought twice about maybe doing side light or, like shooting at noon where there's like a lot of harsh light and a lot of shadows. I never thought about it. I'm like, I could never like control that type of light. So recently I started doing that. I go out like the worst time of day. I'm like, at 12 o'clock. It's time. Let's go. I have like a timer. Here we go. The sun's like beating down on all of us. And, it's just, we get a lot of harsh shadows, but I find little areas like pockets of a bush or something, or like somebody's porch that has some very interesting light. And we get some really cool pictures. And I don't think about, the lines have to add up and, like lead to her, I don't know, her face. I don't even, whatever it may be. I'm not the type of person that lets that dictate how I shoot. I don't know about you.
Yeah, 100%. I think a lot of people are scared of what they don't know or don't understand and aren't comfortable with.
Yeah.
And I find it so weird that people are so easy to judge on things that maybe they're scared about themselves. But yeah, and once you do feel like you're comfortable in an area, I think that is the time to go out and do something different. If you're used to always shooting at golden hour at the perfect light where it's easy, where photos to get are like you don't even have to open your eyes. They're just like coming out of your camera.
You got like a spot ready, like just stand right there. I shoot here all the time.
Right? Exactly.
You don't switch it up.
Exactly. Like you just like set it up and you have your assistant come in. You're like, I don't even need to do it anymore. It's like at that point, it's just like, why bother? Why bother if it's like automatic? Why bother if like it's so routine?
Yeah,
like,
it gets boring.
Yeah, it gets boring for you as like a artist, like doing the same thing over and over. And gosh, I have a lot of thoughts coming in right now. But one is about how if you have created a niche for yourself and you created a style for yourself, when you go outside of that, it's so interesting because some people immediately will tell you how much they dislike it or how much it doesn't connect with them, or because it's different, because it's not what you usually do. Exactly. And just I've seen you do this. I've seen you post images. Like I remember when you were going through a phase where you were doing like a lot of like grain on your images and doing like more like darker. And like I loved that. I think it looked so creative. But like I remember we had conversations about how you were like, people are like hating on some of these just because they're different. And like I love these images.
Man, you made such a good point because I don't even remember that. But now that you're talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember. It's weird because I did go through different phases. Like I had that abstract period where it was like chromatic aberration. Did I say that right? And it was kind of like separating the channels on the pictures and making them look kind of blurry in a way. And I really loved it. I love this like old vintage blurry type of look, but when I posted it, people did not respond well to it. Some people would say stuff like, oh, this looks like it was taken on an iPhone. That's like the go-to comment. Like, this is Jessica, you took this on an iPhone. That's like the go-to. And then a lot of people were like, this looks cheap, or it looks low quality. Oh, did you take this on like a toy camera? And I understand that they're not used to seeing that from me. But those are some of my favorite pictures. I feel like they're so much more artistic than what I usually do. But I kind of got scared. I'm like, I don't know if I want to keep posting these if people don't really like them that much, even though I like them a lot. So you're just kind of fighting with the fact that, okay, do you want to post something that you really like but everybody hates, or are you going to post something that everybody loves but you're not the biggest fan of? So it's just kind of finding a balance. And sometimes you just got to post and be like, look, this is what I got for you. It's like your mom making food.
This is what I got.
It's like your mom making food. Like you come home and maybe she made something that you don't really like, and she's like, listen, that's all I got for you. You can starve today. That's it. You either eat
but
this.
Also, like, it's so funny because all of these people are getting free art all the time from you consistently, and they be hating. Why?
I mean, what? It's fine. People,
I know.
Everybody has their opinion, and I try not to take it personally. There are people who truly are like fans of mine and really like they love to see my work, which is kind of weird to even say out loud, like, well, who wants, but and they like to see a certain style, so I understand. So I kind of try to do a little bit of everything, I guess. But it is hard to do when you get kind of stuck in a certain style and people expect that from you, and you're kind of limited to that. If you try to do something else, people don't respond to it, and as well, and it can be kind of discouraging. It's like, those, the actors like from Harry Potter. People know them as Ron and Harry and Hermione, and then when they try to do something else, it's like, oh, it's Harry from Harry Potter.
Oh, it's Ron.
What I mean? It's like they're trying to do something different. It's hard
so
to grow.
True.
It's hard for them to grow. That's what I'm saying, because people put them in that box, and it's like, how can they ever shed that like past that they did and do something different when people just won't accept it because they want them to be 100%. Harry Potter forever.
True. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I think we should do a whole other podcast
on
about
Harry Potter.
On Ron Weasley. Ron.
Is he your favorite?
Love you. We're probably related. I don't know. I'm a ginger.
Oh my God,
so
that's right. Ron, are you listening to this? Wait.
Literary related.
I just say let people shoot however they want to shoot. And as long as you get a nice picture, it doesn't really matter how you got it, right? Unless it wasn't illegal. Unless you're not doing something illegal or against the law.
That's true.
Or hurting anybody, then I don't. If people want to use lights, if they don't. You know what? Honestly, I'm going to say I would like to learn more about using strobes. And the thing is, I have shot with them before. I don't think it's the issue of, not knowing how to use them. They can be very intimidating, like you said, for any photographer to set them up. Which light? There are so many different brands of lights. How do you know which type of modifier to get? There are so many different things about, studio photography, especially, that you would need to know about. It's kind of like a whole different genre of photography, if you will. So definitely it's understandable why a lot of people choose to just do natural light first. It just seems like the most natural way of starting. And if you have the time, if you have the resources and the money, it costs a lot of money. Let's be real here. So that's kind of why I avoided it, to be honest. But you need a studio. You think I have money for a studio? I don't. It can be expensive. Whereas you go outside and it's free and you just shoot wherever. A little bit more creative. I have shot studio before. I'll tell you personally, I thought it was kind of boring. It was kind of like the same picture over and over again. Honestly, like, you've shot studio. It's kind of the same thing. Unless you have like this amazing setup.
Yeah, I think studio photography has a lot to do with your budget. I think,
like, how much money you got? Like, that's what the question, you know what I mean? That's what you got to be thinking about.
It's so much about the creativity that you put into the set design. Set designers, shout out to you and producers for putting this stuff together, because it is so much work and you don't get enough appreciation for that. But if you're doing it yourself as a photographer, it's so hard to put that together, especially if the budget rests on you.
Yeah.
And you would be so shocked of if you're not just using a seamless or a black or a white simple wall, to get a beautiful kind of like setup, it does cost like a decent amount of money. Even a backdrop is not that cheap. It's $50 to $75. And for a starter photographer, that's like a good amount of money. It goes both ways. If you have the means and the budget, it's endless. I mean, think of all the movies that were shot on sound stages. Like those, that you'd be surprised. But, you know, as a starting photographer, it is so accessible and so easy to just walk outside and start shooting. And I think that's a great place to start. And I do agree. You know, I think the takeaway from this one is you shouldn't be judgmental on the tools that anyone uses or the process for their own creativity. If it's not your style, you don't have to like it. And
wow.
I think, you know,
love it.
It's
Glenn's
true.
like, you don't have to like it.
You don't have to like it, you know, move on. Like, do you know how many Instagram pages there are out there? Do you know how many creatives there are in the world? You know, your job as a consumer is to find the people that you connect with. And it's also your job to be respectful and not hate on things that maybe you don't understand or maybe you don't connect with.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that just because I shoot natural light and, you know, you shoot with strobes doesn't mean that I'm better than you or you're better than me. So I think it's just, even saying it out loud is like, come on, we already all knew
so
this.
Weird,
it's
right?
Like,
it's cringy.
Why do I even have to talk about this? But
exactly.
There are some people who, you know, it's like, what equipment did you use? Like what? And you know what? I can understand. It is interesting to know how people shot certain things. Like I would love to learn more about studio photography and the types of light that you can get by, you know, with like rim lights and different strobes and different modifiers. That's so interesting to me. Do I have the time and the resources and the money to put into learning all that? Not right. Maybe not right now. Maybe in the future. So you just can't expect people to just know all of these things. You have to think, okay, not everybody has access to these things. To be able to learn studio photography, let's just be realistic. You know, yeah, it's photography costs a lot of money. Even the camera costs a lot of money. So that's why, again, I started out shooting natural light. I appreciate and respect all strobe shooters. I respect natural light shooters. I don't care if you're gonna take a picture with a freaking cardboard box. I don't, do your thing.
Or trash, like we
trash. Do your thing. If that's what you like, we support you. And get the pictures that you like. Who cares how you got it? Just take some nice pictures and be true to yourself.
Exactly.
It's like a Disney movie. Like, just be true. Be yourself.
Be you.
Be you. And use like 10 strobes.
Yeah, right.
If you're not using 10 strobes, you're doing it wrong. Okay? That's just
Do you. Do you, and
20 strobes.
No judgment.
You know what's a really funny situation which can further emphasize our point that natural light is still very hard to shoot. To shoot in. You know, remember when we were shooting our 10 seconds versus 1 minute versus 10 seconds? And then we were shooting outside. All of a sudden, like, there was literally no one on the block. It was so quiet. You can like hear yourself breathe. And then the second that we went out to start shooting, literally like 10 grandmas come out, 20 families come out with like people in their scooters that I haven't seen since like 1990s. I haven't seen the scooter, but somehow this girl has it and she's like scooting around in it. And then a helicopter flies past, and then the car's like speeding past us, and then dogs are like barking. I'm like, why? Who sent you all at the same time to do this? Like,
don't we know now that as soon as you press the record button, there's like this silent alarm that goes around to everyone's phones, and they're like, all right, it's time to go. It's time to get outside. Time to make some noise.
They're like packing their stuff.
It's like, why?
Like Jim's at home, like asleep. Jim's home asleep, and then he hears the alarm. He's like, yep, now it's time. Gotta wash the dishes.
Time to go Basey shooting.
Gotta take the family out for a stroll. His wife leaves work early. She's like, I gotta make it in time. Jessica's shooting her video. I gotta ruin it. I gotta just make noise.
It's so true.
I think it's just more funny than anything. And so you have to deal with a lot of those external factors where, again, in studio, I mean, it's probably super quiet, relaxing. Maybe you guys are like singing Kumbaya. I can't even hear myself when I'm outside most of the time. So So you just I don't want to say it's easier, but it's definitely more controlled
Yes.
as an environment. So
Yeah.
So just to give ourselves some credit as natural light photographers, that's what we deal with, and it's fun, and that's a part of the experience of shooting outdoors.
Absolutely. There's
Right?
definitely pros and cons of each, but shooting outside, and most of my experience shooting outside has been travel photography. So every location is incredibly different.
Oh yeah.
And I think you have so much more room for spontaneous moments to happen because you're interacting with different people and different places. And, I think you don't get that. Like, when we were shooting our trash video for your channel, and there's this cute pug that walked past, and he was so adorable, and we like stopped and like you took a little portrait of him, and like the sweetest thing ever. And like that never would have happened if we had been inside in a studio. And I think when you shoot outdoors, you open yourself up to these little like spontaneous moments that can happen, which is really cool and fun.
Yeah, man, you're not gonna see a dog walking around the studio. You know what I mean? Like he's not gonna
No.
be strolling past there, so that you can take. That was a cute moment.
Right.
Loved
So
it.
cute.
And those are what makes the experience special, in my opinion. So
True.
definitely is a challenge shooting outside. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise, that you're less of a photographer if you're not using like 50 lights. So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
that's the truth right
We're
there.
calling it how it is.
I got yelled
Yeah.
at. I got kicked out. I got barked at by dogs. Got barked at by people. Got stared
Yeah.
at. Had people asking for the model's number. Everything you could think of. Everything. And that's the experience. But those are experiences. And yeah, so you see a lot, basically.
Yeah.
Reality TV.
Thanks for tuning in, you guys, to the Light Muse podcast. We hope you enjoyed this one. And just make sure when you're doing your art, don't let other people's judgments influence what you're creating.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more, if you want to follow us, you can find us at Light Muse Podcast on Instagram or YouTube, or at our website, lightmusepodcast.com. And until then, we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.